All right, hello and welcome everybody to Dispersing the Fog. This is episode 37 of Dispersing the Fog, November 23rd, 2025. I'm Adam Rogers here with Paul Palango. Paul, we've got a great show lined up tonight.
I'm stoked about this one.
Yeah, we've got some great a follow-up on a guest we had on episode 32. Kurt Petrovich was talking about Robert Dziekanski and the report, forthcoming report, and we have the results of that. So we'll get to that momentarily. Uh, Paul, we've got a few other things, some exciting, not exciting, some big news in the on former Olympian Ryan Wedding. I've got a few things to talk about. His lawyer got arrested. This is a now, um, I guess, gang leader, international criminal gang leader, former Olympian. And I've got just an old friend of yours, former CERT director Alonzo Wright, was involved in an interesting case this week too, which we'll get into. But before that, anything aside from the stories, Paul, with going on this week?
There's lots, as usual, there's lots going on. I don't even know where to start. I think the funniest one, and we'll come up when we get to our guest, Tammy Oliver McCurdie today, one of the survivors of the families in Portapique. She was the sister of Jolene Oliver, who was murdered along with her husband Aaron Tuck and her daughter Emily Tuck. And this is going to be one of the first Portapique people to come forward and talk about what has gone on.
It's
We've
it's
had
just
we've
yeah.
had Scott McLeod on in the past,
Hmm.
but I'm looking forward to hearing Tammy.
Me too, and it's obviously a sensitive topic for anybody and family members to discuss. Not many family us. We've had Scott McLeod on. I know Nick Beaton has given interviews, but really there haven't been many family members who have spoken out. And I think this is, I know Tammy Oliver McCurdie has spoken to CBC, done some interviews there, but this will, I think, be the first really longer form interview that she's done. So looking forward to hearing from her and her
And there's a
perspective.
few things that come up this week I want to talk to her about, so I don't want to blow what we're going to say and repeat it.
All right. No, that's fine. I was going to mention just very quickly down in the valley this week, your old friend Alonzo Wright, now Judge Alonzo Wright. So we have to be obviously very respectful of that. But
Oh, wait, I got to be respectful. Yeah, yeah.
yes, so
Alonzo, when you were head of CERT, did you figure out who killed Corey Ellison? Were you looking into that? Oh no, you left in no time. Yeah.
he wasn't very long in that role. Now he has on his hands Rick Mehta, former professor at Acadia University, who I'm sure Acadia is thrilled every time his name is in the news that they get associated with him. He was in court for uttering threats and was very disrespectful to the court, and the judge called him buddy boy. It kept on this thing. Every once in a while, people will do this. So, I pay taxes, so technically I'm your boss.
Yeah.
No, you're not. You're not. It's the judge is the boss. But anyway, he had. Are you familiar with the movie They Live? It's a horror movie, I guess, of some sort. Anyway, Rick Mehta apparently quoted from this movie, and the quote was an old one, which is, "I'm here to chew gum and kick ass, and I'm all out of gum." Which apparently one of the characters quoted just or said just before shooting up an office. So Rick Mehta made the decision to send this message to the court staff in Kentville and was promptly arrested for uttering threats. So he seems to have gone off the deep end. Some people do this, right? They'll get a little nutty, and I think when you're maybe an intelligent person, maybe you fall farther. But he seems certainly to have done so. Uh,
Can I
so
say
anyway.
people who get their news from Netflix, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no kidding, right? But Paul, the big story this week is a follow-up from interview we did with Kurt Petrovich, CBC, former CBC reporter, who had been really engrossed in the Robert Dziekanski situation and the fallout from that. Four RCMP officers charged who had, attended the scene, charged with obstruction of justice. Two were convicted, two were not, which was really strange. And if anybody wants a fulsome discussion of that, go back and listen to the interview with Kurt. But this week, Paul, there was a report issued, and What do you think? Maybe you can describe the results and then we can get into it a little bit.
Well, the OPP were asked 5 years ago to conduct a criminal investigation into the activities of the senior RCMP management in relation to what happened at Vancouver Airport um, back in what was it, 2007, to Robert Dziekanski, a Polish man who was visiting Canada, got lost at the airport, wasn't picked up, went a little cuckoo. Four Mounties responded. They on video tasered him. Dziekanski died. And originally, the Mounties were exonerated for they were just following their training.
Yeah.
And then eventually, a public hearing was held, the Braidwood inquiry, and the tables turned, and then they were charged with perjury, not for what happened at the airport, but their stories didn't all fit together perfectly, as Kurt Petrovic explained. They had four separate trials. The two white officers were exonerated, and the indigenous guy, Sergeant Benjamin Monty Robinson, and another constable, Quasi Millington, were convicted. And then they all sued, including the guys who were exonerated who
Yeah.
sued. And then they all received settlements. But Robinson and Rundle, Jerry Rundle, one of the officers who wasn't convicted, continued to pursue this and forced a criminal investigation by the OPP, Ontario Provincial Police. They brought their investigation down the other day and gave it to Monty Robinson, who was and others were in the room with him, and they all had to sign non-disclosure agreements and not circulate the report, which is like 260 pages. The RCMP took the position that because they called in the OPP to investigate this, they owned the information and the document. And they even put watermarks on all the documents so that people wouldn't, it could all be traced back to who had a copy.
Yeah, that in itself, Paul, is really a problem, isn't it? I mean, this is a publicly relevant situation, obviously, it seems, right? So that
Absolutely.
report needs to be that should be public.
But this is sort of the business-like mentality of the RCMP and the government. We own the information. They forget they're not a business.
No.
They're a guardian agency. And what happened at YVR and to those officers and others is well documented in this report. Although the one story I've seen on it on CTV in Vancouver, John Woodward, a reporter, got a copy of this the other day on Thursday or Friday and did a story. You can look it up. Very good summary of what was in the report, but it leads with sort of the executive summary. And the executive summary goes, the OPP found no criminal behavior by the RCMP management.
Yeah, that was a peculiar kind of way they framed it, Paul. It was like these senior officers are looking at this as sort of a professional responsibility situation, and in that role of professional responsibility oversight, their job isn't to lay charges, and since they didn't lay charges, I don't know. I found it a little
But if
strange.
you go through
Um,
I know you haven't had time to go through it all. I went through
yeah.
it all last night and today. And I've talked to others who have gone through it, and we've got various people looking at it. And it's unbelievable because what it shows in this report is the absolute incompetence and corruption of the senior RCMP. I know those are hard words, but you can't come to any other conclusion. It's unbelievable that how these four officers were railroaded. I didn't think that when I wrote my book in 2008. I didn't know. I thought they were just being incompetent. But Kurt Petrovich laid out a very good argument, and then I've gone through it numerous times now, And quite clearly, they thought they were following procedures and their training. They were told that afterward, that's what they did. And then when public opinion started to turn and the RCMP started to feel the heat, they turned on their own officers and made them scapegoats. And that's all detailed in this OPP report.
Well, you're not coming to this completely fresh, I guess, Paul. Like you say, you've written about this. You're familiar with the people involved, and this is a story you know quite well.
Yeah, I know it. I've met with a lot of the people involved in this over the years. Recently, on my trip to Vancouver, I met with a bunch of them. I knew this was coming. And what the report shows, and we want to have some of these people on to really talk about it in the future, but they're still trying to figure out their legal situation. Like I'd like to get Monty Robinson on to tell his story. He's sort of been
Yeah.
beaten down but defiant, as he says, "Who wants to be listen to me? I've been convicted and stuff like that." But he continues to fight. He wouldn't accept a settlement, even though they're offering him a settlement. He wouldn't accept it because he wants the truth.
Well, they're being offered settlements, it seems like, because the RCMP knows that they did them wrong. Like there were things that weren't disclosed. The initial one of the things I saw was, they in fact were acting in accordance with their training, and that wasn't being clarified. And before they gave their statements, they weren't allowed to see the video that
Yeah,
had been, I could see some, all right, there's some benefits to this, right? As a witness, if you don't see the video and you give a statement and then we look at the video and your statement accords with it, well, all the better, right? If you see the video first, maybe you're going to tailor your statement to what you've just seen. But, this is basic stuff for defense. If you have to be you receive your disclosure first and then, you don't give a statement until you have. And
Oh, the four officers went into this, late at night. I think it was on a Saturday night. A hectic situation within like, what was it, 35 seconds.
yeah,
They wrestled Dziekanski to the ground. He had a stapler. They tasered him, but he was an alcoholic. He was a big man. He went into distress. Probably arrhythmia set in, had a heart attack, and died.
yeah,
It was an ugly situation. Then they had to recall what happened. All four of them had different versions of the story, not knowing that there was a videotape, and they weren't told that. And even after that, they were all the commissioner of the day, William Elliott, called them in, congratulated him, and said, "We're on our side. We're going to defend you." All the Mounties said they were just following procedures, and then that sort of disappeared.
yeah. Well, as soon
Eventually,
as yeah.
they were convicted on perjury charges, Robinson and Millington, not because they lied about what happened, but because their stories differed later when they were in a public hearing. It was it's
Yeah.
insanity, but they were hung out to dry.
It is. It's very unusual, right? I mean, every day in court, people's stories change, or, four different witnesses to the same incident, even if you're involved, you're going to have four different accounts, no matter what, just try it, try it in the room wherever you are. Like if you're in a group somewhere, just, all right, describe something that just happened and you're going to get four different versions, at least slightly different. So
And,
that part's not unusual. The fact that they were charged for perjury I mean, it's not often done, really.
well, they, after the trials in 2013 and 2015, Robinson and Rundle started sending access to information requests to find out details. These should be answered. What's the timeline? 3 months? Two
Yeah.
months?
Oh, yeah. If,
It went on for 5 years. And the RCMP dragged its feet, couldn't find documents, then more documents were found. And then eventually in 2020, the RCMP public complaints access to information people said the complaint will be concluded shortly as well founded. That their complaint was well founded. That's their words. And with that, Rundle and Robinson lobbied the RCMP. and an RCMP, I think it was a chief superintendent or assistant commissioner at the time, Eric Stubbs, called in the OPP to do an investigation. Stubbs eventually moved on to become the police chief in Ottawa. OPP did its investigation. Oh, well, people think an independent police force is coming in. Show me in Canada when one of these investigations ever led to charges.
Yeah, especially against senior officers, it just
Yeah,
seems rare.
never
And
happens.
and it's pretty bad. In this case, there was, the treatment of the four officers, and really they were thrown under the bus by senior management, it seemed like. And then there was a politician, I don't know if he's the Minister of Justice or Public Safety in BC, had a meeting about and broached the subject of switching out from the RCMP as a force, and all of a sudden he's being charged, you
Well,
know?
that's in the report. Cash Heed, former police chief in West Vancouver, became the public safety minister solicitor general in
That's what it was.
BC. And during this, he raised his concerns with the RCMP. And during the meeting, said, I'm considering looking at setting up a provincial police force in BC and getting the RCMP out of this job. Within a week, the RCMP came back and said, you're under investigation for political financing violations.
Yeah.
They laid charges, dismissed. Went after him again, dismissed. Went after him like three times. This happened to Doug McCallum in Surrey. It happened to Edgar McLeod in Cape Breton. Whenever the
Yeah.
RCMP was threatened, politicians get threatened. And that's why they don't threaten with criminal charges.
Yeah.
That's why it's hard to get the RCMP out because they play dirty.
And it's such a powerful tool, you're talking about Officer Robinson there. A criminal charge, certainly a criminal conviction, it taints a person in just such a unique way that, it can silence a person like few other things can do. They
There
just
was a
nobody
public
wants to talk about it.
inquiry. There was a public inquiry, the Braidwood inquiry. In the report, Braidwood had this ridiculous inquiry where he essentially said they're all guilty. In the OPP report, the RCMP, the conclusion of wrongdoing by the RCMP was done before the end of the Braidwood inquiry. They decided they were guilty.
Hmm.
But not only that, Braidwood thought they were guilty. That
Yeah.
comes that comes clear in the OPP report. The other people who were destroyed in this, I'd like to have them on at some point, who were attacked. Shirley Heafy, who we've talked about before, who was RCMP complaints commissioner for 10 years, she's interviewed in this, and I know she's quite upset about what has happened. Another person whose career was destroyed by this was Mike Webster, RCMP paid psychologist,
Oh, yes.
challenged the force on a number of issues back in the day. One being what happened at the Gustafson Lake standoff. And then with this one, he was in support of the officers. The RCMP set up an investigation on him called Project E Northern and went after him, literally ran him out of town, did all kinds of unscrupulous things to go after him.
Yeah.
And there's evidence, an officer, Pierre Lemaitre, committed suicide because
Yeah,
he
this
was
is the
found down
spokesman.
on
Yeah.
this. Another officer, Carl, committed suicide. It's just outrageous. And one of the people I focus on in this, I look at, who really, one of the Mounties that's caught up in this is former Deputy Commissioner Brenda. Oh, what's
Brenda Lucky?
no, Brenda Butterworth Carr.
Oh, yeah, yeah, from BC. Yes.
Brenda Butterworth Carr, in the OPP investigation, she was the commissioner around the time just before the criminal investigation began, and she was the commissioner. She'd come over from Saskatchewan, and she had files and done interviews and all this stuff. All her stuff went missing. And they talk about these are electronic files. They have years trying to track down her stuff. And she wouldn't cooperate because she said, well, until I read my notes, I can't testify to what happened because I can't remember everything. Therefore, I won't testify. And then they couldn't find her notes.
Wow.
And she
Wow.
wasn't the only one.
But that seems like a convenient, a convenient unfolding of events for somebody. I mean, that
Well,
doesn't
no
happen
kidding.
accidentally.
I mean, but it's part of the problem. We've talked in the past about politicization of the force and how people get put in positions because of politics, not because of ability. And Brenda Butterworth Carr was, uh, uh, I guess she got into the force in the Yukon as an indigenous person who worked as a special constable, then worked her way up through the force, was sent to Ottawa, got on the fast track. They promoted her quickly, put her in charge of Saskatchewan for 2 years, moved her over to BC, which was the largest detachment. And then appears to be completely out of her depth. When she gets pushed out in 2020, she gets hired by the province of BC to become the head of police services, an assistant deputy minister. So she was part of the RCMP, then in government running all policing. What do you think is going to happen? I mean,
Yeah.
she's not objective.
No, no, and those are all sort of political moves. From the outside looking in, it certainly looks that way.
Well, the last thing about Brenda Butterworth Carr, when she was in the assistant deputy minister job,
Yeah.
this is how she saw her job. She brought in someone to sit on a board, a police board, whose father he was indigenous because she thought this would be good for indigenous relationships, but whose father was in the Hells Angels, and
Okay.
she thought, well, that was his father. This is him, even though there were photographs of him at a Hells Angels funeral. Um, And that was the end of her days as a deputy minister as well, assistant deputy minister, because the Fuhrer got so bad she had to be gone. But here she is, a key person who's protected, gets a big pension, along with a number of other people, while other people have committed suicide, died, and no one is held accountable. Not one of them. There's a whole list of people in this report, and you go through it and you think, this is outrageous.
Be really interesting, I think, Paul, to hear from some of the people that are featured or mentioned in the report interviewed and hear what their perspective is versus, from what they thought they were telling versus what emerged in the report and the conclusions in the report and, whether they agree with them. I guess that would be the big thing.
Oh, for sure. I'd like to get on, maybe in the future, Moira Webster can talk about Project Northerner and what it did to her life. This bogus investigation and all the crazy things the RCMP did. I want her to tell it. Maybe we'll have her on someday. Monty Robinson is still meeting with lawyers about where to go forward on this. He is absolutely upset about it. And there's others. It's crazy.
Of course, they all have to, I guess they have to navigate those non-disclosure agreements, but I guess you got a copy.
Yeah, I
You're an
mean, a
investigative
whole bunch of
journalist, no
people have.
less.
John Woodward in CTV obviously had a copy,
Yeah. No, no.
and
That
once that
happened.
was out, I ended up getting a copy.
Yeah, that's it. And by the way, that's a good thing. These reports should be public by default, and so it's good that it's out there. It should never have been handled otherwise.
Oh, absolutely. It's. I think it's a treasure trove of things to tell people. You got people who don't understand, don't care to think about how lack of accountability affects their everyday lives and the lives of other people across Canada until it hits them directly. And the RCMP exploits this, and the government exploits this.
Wow.
You
There,
you can't you
but
can't do anything about it. We saw it in Nova Scotia. And you're seeing out there like Monty Robinson has fought this from the beginning. Jerry Rundle has fought this from the beginning. And, Jerry Rundle is still on the force, even after he got a settlement. And he's reluctant to step forward, I understand. But Monty someday is going to come forward. I'd love to have him on.
Well, there's so that's BC, and I'm sure this will reverberate around any discussions that are taking place on the future of the RCMP out west. Geez, there was a story this week, Paul, Meadow Lake in Saskatchewan. Tribal council very upset with the RCMP there. Response times for an hour on average, usually more. There was a 9 hour an officer that didn't go to a wellness check for 9 hours, and the person ended up dying in the hospital. Like, there's other areas out there where the RCMP is being heavily criticized, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of a dramatic response to try to fix any of these things.
Well, the case in Saskatchewan, the officer sat in the detachment for 9 hours
Yeah.
and didn't go to the wellness check. Person died. This is typical of what's happening across the country. In Saskatchewan, they're still talking about setting up a sheriff's service
Yeah,
and
some marshal thing,
a
something.
stalking horse for a provincial police force. And of course, the RCMP and the RCMP union are fighting back. This is a terrible idea. This will be too expensive. Geez, all they want is proper policing. As Kurt Allen explained the other day on our show, he said, or Edgar McLeod before him,
Yeah.
there's enough money in the system for policing. It's the way the policing is being done that's the problem.
We've got Tammy Oliver McCurdie. I don't want to wait too long. I just want to mention something quick about this Ryan wedding case, Paul, before we bring her in. There was a lawyer, Deepak Parak Paradkar. Nicknames include Cocaine Lawyer, Deepak Emergency, and Descartes. Not sure what Descartes is supposed to be. If it's a reference to Rene Descartes or something else. But this guy now apparently told Ryan Wedding, who is now former Olympian, now international, drug smuggler and such, who was in the news this week for having ordered the killing of a key witness. And the lawyer got in trouble because the lawyer apparently told Ryan Wedding, this is the allegation from the United States, from the FBI, that if you kill this guy, then the case is probably going to go away. I'd be very curious. I just mentioned this now because I want to follow this story a little bit into the future because it'll, I think a lot of lawyers will be watching this. What exactly is he alleged to have told Ryan Wedding? Because it is incredibly common for a lawyer to tell their client, well, here's the case against you. It'll, there's one key witness that knows this, there's another key witness that knows this, or whatever. And often it is one witness. But of course, you don't tell your client, well, if you just went and killed them, then they won't show up to court and you won't have to worry about it. Um, so, was it, in this case, was it an actual, hey, you should have this person killed? Or was it just simply, hey, by the way, client, you've got one person that can put you away in this particular case. And that's just part of the discussion of in preparing for trial that you should know that to see anyway how direct that was because if it's just sort of implied, I think this lawyer is probably not in as much trouble as he may seem to be. So we'll see how that develops.
Well, but my take on that story is I had somebody send this to me. Ryan Wedding, Canadian Olympian, big cocaine dealer, murderer, hooked up with all the bad guys. Finally gets arrested or gets his warrant went from or no his they put a $50,000 reward out on him last year. Now it's up to 15 million
Yeah.
in a year. Not caught in Canada, very little done in Canada. It happens in the States and elsewhere that they're bringing him down. It's the U.S. Authorities are going after him. But then there was this press conference in the States the other day about Ryan Wedding.
Yeah.
And who's there front and center with Pam Bondi, the notorious, sort of almost despicable Pam Bondi, Commissioner of the RCMP, Michael Duhaime, standing there proud as anything. Look at the great job we're doing here. Uh, it's unbelievable. These guys are whores for publicity and aren't doing their job.
Wow. I'm sure they're thrilled to promote anything that looks like cross-border cooperation at this
Yeah,
point
yeah.
in that world. So
And all he's doing is
that's what
making
it's
the
all
case
about.
Trump has made. The drugs are coming from Canada, and you guys are doing nothing up there.
Yeah,
And to him is so stupid. He goes down there with Pam Bondi to show, hey, look at the great job we're doing. You guys, yeah, and guess what? We're going to save money here because you're doing all the court stuff. You're doing all the investigation, and you're going to pay the $15 million reward, maybe, you know?
yeah.
In Canada, not so much. We don't do very much.
Good deal for Canada in that sense,
Yeah, yeah,
financially, but
it
but
passed off an expense to the Americans, and look, we came in under budget again. Give us more money.
yeah, and yet we cannot seem to capture this no doubt super identifiable criminal. Okay, let's Paul, let's bring in
Yeah.
Tammy Oliver McCurdie, and looking forward to having a discussion with her. We'll bring her in right now.
Oh, just 1 second.
There you are.
All right.
Hi.
All
Is
right.
that
Okay.
snow there, Tammy?
This is just a picture of what it looks like outside.
It's it might look like
Yes.
that in Nova Scotia in the next few days. I'm hearing if I'm hearing the weather properly.
Yeah,
Well,
our boots and our winter jackets are out and the snow's on the ground.
wow.
Yeah.
Well, it looks peaceful. I don't know if it's always like that when it snows, but it looks very nice.
So you're in
Tammy.
Yes.
Alberta. Where in Alberta are you?
Red Deer.
Red Deer.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Smack right dab in the middle of the two major cities.
Oh, it's a nice
It's
spot right
nice and
there.
quiet.
Yeah, well, that's good. So a lot of fights over the hockey there, Oilers or Flames, Tammy?
Yes. Yes.
No doubt.
Yeah,
Go
I'm a
north.
Flames fan, but from way back. My husband's a Toronto fan, so
Oh, geez. Well, you got
yeah,
one up on him
Well, I
then.
can tell you what, Tammy, he's going to be depressed another year. So,
I know.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
See,
he'll win.
the flip side is I sleep well at night when they lose.
Is that what it is?
So
Yeah.
it's good to have you here. Take us back for like a few minutes about how you got here, like what happened, your story about your family and the Nova Scotia massacres.
Like how I got here on the show today?
Pardon?
How I got on the show
No, well,
today?
how
Like
you
did
got
I
to this point in your life, like in April 18th, 19th, 2020, you
Mhm.
received a phone call, right?
Well, I was at work and I heard about there was a guy running around in a vehicle and someone at work said they were in Portapique. Is your family okay? And I said, oh, I'm sure they're okay. I'm sure if something happened, Aaron probably hid them somewhere. Like Aaron was very protective over my sister and my niece. And, we didn't hear anything. We didn't hear anything, and this progressed because this is the next day on Sunday. And so I thought, you know what? I should probably go over to my mom's house. She's probably freaking out right now. So let me go check on her. I am 7. My parents live in Red Deer, so I'm literally 5 to 10 minutes away from them no matter where I am. And so I go over to my parents' house. And she hasn't heard anything. Nobody was responding on their phones. We've sent messages. I even called Jolene, my sister. We all had sent messages and phone calls to get some kind of "are you okay?" and nobody was responding. So of course your brain goes to best case scenario. You don't want to think about the worst. As Aaron, if they're stuck in Portapique as they've cordoned off the area, Aaron's probably hid them in the woods somewhere from the perpetrator, whoever's running around with a gun. And then as we watching the news, and numbers keep going up. They found X and more people, found dad, they found X more people, and the numbers keep increasing, but nothing about my family. We went to Facebook. If anybody knows anything about Jolene, Aaron, and Emily, please let us know. All of us were on Facebook just trying to get answers and some kind of response on, are they in the hospital? What does this look like? Never thinking in our worst moments that we get a phone call that day to say that all three of them, and just as we got the phone call, the numbers increased on the screen. So it was horrific to watch my parents pretty much will fall to the ground. I'm trying to be there for them and me and my family. My husband's there, my kids are there because we live close. Unfortunately, my older sister and her family are up we're in Edmonton area, so they're like an hour and a half away. And yeah, that was late in the day because they didn't find their bodies for 20 hours later. So we're talking Alberta time, late Sunday night, that we find out what's happening with our family, as we spent all afternoon, all morning trying to get answers. My mom was calling them since 7 o'clock Alberta time, which is about 10 o'clock your time, and nothing. So
Like no answers at all, Tammy, from like was anybody even answering the phone to take a name or anything like that?
oh, we all tried to call whoever's going to take our name and do a welfare check, do a welfare check. We kept saying, do a welfare check. When we got the news actually did not go to my mom and dad first. It went to my older sister's, my older sister's daughter, Sarah, who was just barely like 18, 19 at the time. And Sarah got the information, my niece. And then she relayed it to my sister, who then obviously crushed and fell to the floor, and then had to call my parents and say, this is the information we received. So even though my parents had left many messages, give us a call, it was how they called my niece, I don't know. We were all calling looking for answers. But yeah, nothing till Sunday night.
Well, if I might interject, as I recall, what the RCMP said they were doing, Officer Skipper Bent, I think, said that they were sending text messages to Aaron Tuck's phone, and that he was okay. That was their check. They weren't actually going to the house. And we do know that other Mounties were right near the house that night and that morning. Sorry, Staff Sergeant Al Carroll was right there the next morning and didn't check the house.
Well, and even if they even would have drove by the house, which they didn't, because they were on the same court as the Bonds, Aaron's body was propping the door open. So it's just like, there's no way that you could do even a drive-by and miss it because the door was open. And so there's a lot of questions, still a lot of non-answers. And that's the thing, is we're 5+ years later and no answers to very basic questions.
It was one of the, I guess, heartfelt, touching moments early on was hearing Emily play the violin, playing the fiddle, Tammy, and that I know that was was something that was pretty special to people. And there was, I think, a duet with Natalie McMaster played at the service. Was you have a musical family?
Yeah, my son's very musical. He plays drums and guitar. My kids, because they're older than both my sisters, I'm the middle child. My kids, I had them earlier. They babysat, and so they babysat Emily, my son, and my daughter. But my son, he's very musically inclined, so he was playing with the guitar with Emily one time. But there was someone in Calgary who showed Emily the violin, and she took to it right away. Because she wanted to be different than, Rick does guitar and drums, and he was playing in theater music then, plays and stuff. And even back in I think lots of my family have had bands. Like there's a lot of musical people in different areas of my family. But yeah, Emily took to that, and then she took that to Nova Scotia and really got into playing. Got lessons. Aaron took her to structured lessons, and then she used to play for my parents online, and they would share it through Facebook Messenger, and she would show her some of the things that she's working on. So when Emily stayed at my parents for a while, a few years before their death, Emily lived with my parents for about 6 months as Jolene and Aaron they adopted the house from Aaron's father, who had passed away, but needed to really clean it up because he was a hoarder. So they had to really deal with a lot of stuff on the property. So they sent them out to Emily out to my parents to live. And she took lessons in Lacombe here in Alberta as well. So something that when she picked it up, she just loved it. Yeah.
Tammy, you said that it's 5 years down the road. It's actually 5.5 now.
Yeah.
What you said you still don't have answers. Tammy, there was a Mass Casualty Commission where they spent like $50 million getting to
Yeah.
the bottom of this. How could you possibly say that?
Well, I don't that, I've come to realize, and I'm just going to be honest, in those 5.5 years, that commission wasn't for us, because still today, my dying wish is to know the height of the shooter based on all the bullets. My family had a dozen plus bullets in their house. So, and not all those bullets hit their body. So there is on the door, there was bullets on the wall. And so it should be rudimentary to get the height of the shooter and confirmation off of those bullets. But as you know, ballistics, I spent a lot of time online during the commission watching the House of Commons, as there was questions at the House of Commons, and then trying to read through all of those ITOs, which weren't really, they didn't do anything, in my opinion. I was just looking for answers. And then when we got the ballistics reports and they said cannot identify nor eliminate, that made no sense to me. That's just, it either it is or it isn't, so what is it? So I had someone explain that to me to help me understand. Really, it's just, well, it's not even an answer still. And so, as far as the guns used, that's one thing, but it should be pretty rudimentary to figure out the height of the shooter. Now, I delve into a lot of that, trying to become an expert, which I am not. I have assumptions. They're assumptions based on, I know how much I've spent my world in windows and doors. So, and in construction. So I know the height of a door. I know the height of a doorknob. I know the height of where the windows go, in typical doors. And they had a wood door that separated their front area to their hallway so that they can keep their heat in. One of the questions is I got online during the beginning of this is, why didn't your family's house, why wasn't it on fire? So I had to address that. Everyone wants answers, during the first few years. Everyone's grabbing for whatever they can get. I'm like, well, they didn't have propane heat. They had wood heat in their house. So there's no way, it wouldn't be on fire in the same way other houses maybe had propane heat, happening. So,
let me interject before Adam asks the next question. You seem to be suggesting that you doubt that Gabriel Wortman, who was 6'3", was the shooter or the only shooter. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong. It's a narrative. It's their narrative. But unless we get all of the information, it's just a narrative. It's just a story right now. And it's a story that none of us can qualify with the details. When we don't have details to information, how could we qualify anything? And when we can't get very specific details, which is fairly rudimentary in our society, we're fairly advanced, and we should be able to figure out the height of the shooter from a few bullets in a hole and a doorway. That seems pretty simplistic in my mind. that's a problem, you know. So
Well, that was that.
I have my own opinions, but right now they're in opinions that I can't qualify because we don't have information, and apparently the case is staying open, so we can never get access to the files until they close it. So I'm in a predicament where I've got lots of questions but no answers.
So, Tammy, you've tried to get this kind of information about the height of where bullets went into one level and then into into a wall or something, and then try to figure out the height of the shooter from that. Like, have you, like, how much information have you received, and have you reached any alternate conclusions as a result of what you've received?
Okay, well, the complexity. So, like okay, I'm going to step back. I got four main things that weren't addressed in the 130 recommendations for change that we could talk about after. But to be even answer your question, I guess you need to understand, because there's no literature on a lot of family members and what we deal with in large public cases, whether they be school shootings, and there's like police, some questionable actions. There's not a whole lot of data out there or stories to help navigate families through a big, massive public noisy situation, especially when police are involved and it's at the discrepancies of the police force, no matter where it is. But when they set this mass casualty, so let's talk about that, goes into who can ask questions to the mass casualty. Because once there was hey, there's a lawsuit, police, we haven't really heard from them since June 2020, when we had a family meeting and they told us more about what happened in the home. But as people advocated for an inquiry, that became more of a lawsuit, and we didn't really hear from them. We had to go through lawyers. So that means in my situation, my parents are next of kin, right? So everything would go through them.
Yeah.
But they were quite broken. And then in the process of the mass casualty, one family designate was given to the Mass Casualty Commission to deal with the lawyers. So I, as not that designate, but a direct member, I have to wait. Okay, so that designate also had to sign a non-disclosure. So any other family members that wanted information, I had to sign a non-disclosure for my sister, who was our designate, my older sister, to be able to give me information from the mass casualty. That means that if I wanted to ask a question, I would have to submit it to my older sibling, and she would have to submit it to the lawyer. So there was these processes involved that limit anyone in the family who wasn't a designate one person to ask questions. So, you know
Is
what I
that
mean? Do you
why
understand?
it always struck people that the families didn't say anything. That was almost impossible for it to get anyone to say anything. Did everyone have an NDA? Was that what was holding them back, or were there other forces at work?
Possibly, because for me to get information from my older sister and to send information off, I had to go through my older sister to get things. Hey, can you ask them to send this? And I would send a document, type up a Word document. Dad and I have these questions. Could you send this to the lawyers? Because they're just starting the inquiry. Then, of course, it's up to that designate to send that off. Let alone can our lawyers even answer the question or ask the question, let alone get an answer, because our lawyers were limited to what they can ask. And you saw that through the mass casualty, is they had limits. So do we still have answers today? No. To very basic things that would help in our healing process and clear our mind. You know what I mean? And something as simple as ballistics, that's simple. Why they didn't go into my family's home for 20 hours, why they sent staff home at 4 in the morning and not do a check. And that's part of my thing, is when I've got 4 points that were missed in the mass casualty that are integral to getting better in policing, let alone talking about the mistakes.
Yeah, love to
Because
hear
as
those. Yeah, please, yeah, Tammy, tell us those four things, because I think it's important for people to hear.
okay, so one of the things is if we're going to get better at policing, and I spent a lot of time in social planning. I've worked with police forces, fire. I've worked in mostly social prevention in communities, and so and advocacy for things that are needed. And as I sit on this PMC committee, which I can't answer any questions on that, there is a process.
What's the PMT? What is PMT committee? Explain it.
PMC, Progress Monitoring Committee.
Okay.
That's the committee monitoring the 130 recommendations for change. So my term is September this year to June, or extension if needed. But as I re-looked at all of those 130 recommendations, there are things that stood out going, how come we don't have this on there? And then I started thinking, well, it's because our lawyers were limited. The whole process was limited. And so we couldn't get there to make certain things better to society. I get that policing and society has changed greatly, which means that we need to change and look at and have the tough conversations on what needs to change. So in my opinion,
before you get into the four things, though, how could you say that when Michael McDonald, the chairman of the Mass Casualty Commission, was named to the Order of Canada afterwards for his great work?
There was some great work, but it's limited based on the process. So if you have limiting processes, that great work is limited to the processes that preceded that. Right? Okay. So it's for what it is. But what I would say is we need to have a conversation in society as things get more difficult, more gun shootings. Like we've had a lot more in Alberta. Things are getting more complex. So even without that complexity, the question is when there is a gunshot, fire, and a bunch of gunshots, as they said, the RCMP, we heard gunfire, we didn't know where it was coming from, which means that they didn't know where it was going. So what is the due diligence of those police forces, i.e. RCMP or any other municipal police force, to when you have gunshots and you don't know the direction or where it's going, what is the due diligence to check a certain area? And that might be different based on rural, urban, and condensed urban, because you can end up with a ton of houses in a certain setting. So each of them would be, if I was creating a policy, I would say in a rural setting, Portapique was 40 houses. Do police officers have a due diligence to check like 750 meters? Do they have to check for the next half a kilometer of all of the houses to make sure that any of that fire did not hit somebody who was A, bleeding, B, injured, or C, at risk, because we didn't even know where the perpetrator was apparently at that time. So based on their narrative, why wasn't anybody's house checked? Because my family laid there and bled for 20 hours.
But
right?
they said after we went door to door and evacuated people. Not true.
No, absolutely impossible, because they didn't know about my family. And in 40 houses, I could check 40 houses myself, even being risk assessing and whatnot, probably in 2 hours, maybe 2.5. I'm sure I could check the houses in Portapique if I ran around within that time on foot. 20 hours is inexcusable, and sending people home in the middle of the night when you don't know those questions, you don't know who's injured, who's at risk, maybe the perpetrator's in their home, those kinds of things. So that, I would say, needs to be looked at, is creating a policy and procedure around due diligence and checking the area when you don't know where the gunshots are. Another one is, because of the complexity of our society and the police's ability to be able to shut down an area because of imminent threat. So now fire can't come in. Now, my family didn't have a fire, but I'm also saying, when I look at the situation, do police officers need to carry and have some basic fire training and gear or clothing that's fire retardant to be able to, there's houses that they drove by when they picked up Peter Griffin that was on fire that they could have maybe went and checked to see if they could have been saved, right? Questions from that family is they probably could have saved their family, but they burned to death. So do we need to look at in society and answer those questions? And maybe the question's no, but we have to be having those conversations so we know where the line is. Or maybe is it just fire? Do they need some basic police training and protection and gear to go in into a fire, right? So like those are opportunities moving forward on how do we get better. Number 3, um, I'll go to this one first. So what is the due diligence? And I still have yet to investigate the process, but when the Emmy's office, because I'm only a few minutes away from my parents' house, I was there during the initial days all the time. My husband and I stood in the same room that my parents were when we were identifying the pictures online because we were so far. And the pictures needed explanation because I believe we were told a lie. And I'm not the only family that had incorrect information from the Emmy's office to what the coroner had relayed. Obviously, the Emmy's office is getting this from the coroner, saying my sister had a dent in her head. So, she fell on an oil heater in her home, not realizing they don't have oil heaters because they have wood heat. So for me, I still have no idea what the dent, I can assume what the dent in her head was from, but it's nothing that, it was not the truth from what we were told that day. And I know the Emmy's office got the information from somewhere. So my question is moving forward, if we aren't the only family, because I know other families got incorrect information in this particular instance, how many times is that happening? And is there better processes moving forward to ensure that the coroner on the ground gets the information correct for the Emmy to assess and tell the families about? Because that was completely 100% wrong. They don't have oil heaters like, the wood heaters that you see in old homes. You guys have a lot in Nova Scotia. She would have not been able to hit her head on that. That's for sure. Because they didn't have one. So that is a huge concern. And then next, now not in my family's case, but I know this became questioned in other situations, is there a process and policy protocol within the detachment? I know that police respond and that they can assess bodies, but where's the due diligence to call the professionals in, ambulance or a doctor to proceed somebody dead? I'm thinking about Heather O'Brien with the Fitbit, right? Is what is the process and policy? Do we have one within the RCMP? Because what I realized during when I assessed the whole last 5 years, is as I listened to on the PMC, not the PMC, the Mass Casualty, as they were airing different things, and I was watching, and I heard one of the officers say, we didn't know we had the 911, like the emergency alerting system, in our toolbox. When he said those words, I got really angry, and it took me a couple of years to process that. But what he was saying is we don't have a policy and protocol, obviously, then to use it for mass shootings, because what we used to use that emergency alerting system for isn't what we need to use it for today. So when I look at there wasn't policy and procedure in place, how many areas of policies and procedure are we missing because society has changed and RCMP's policy and protocols have not?
Yeah, there's a lot to dig into there, Tammy, with
There's a lot. I gave you a lot.
no, that's great. And that's why we wanted to have you on, because, it's been, like Paul said, 5.5 years, and a lot of
Mhm.
lessons learned. That the one about the sort of cross-pollination of skill sets between firefighters and police officers, I could see that being useful. I mean, a lot of the time when an incident takes place, you'll see the police is called and fire, but sometimes seconds and minutes are everything. And if somebody has that skill set or some flame retardant thing in the trunk that they can just throw on, anyway, I don't know. Something like that
Yeah.
seems like it would be something sensible to look into. But we only have a few minutes, Tammy. I wanted to ask you, about the progress monitoring committee. I know you're limited in what you can say, but try to answer this question, I guess. How busy are you? Like, is it, are you meeting often? Are they sending you a lot of material to review? You don't have to say what the material is, but like, your role seems to be a key one as the family representative, and that's a rotating role from what I understand. Like, are they keeping you busy with things to read and review and updates to consider?
Yes, and part of the, coming onto the committee this year, and I don't know the past years, there is a lot of stuff to review and content consider and stuff. So, and it becomes increasingly more as we're getting nearing the end of that committee because the information's getting more detailed where things started in the beginning, but we're in the last year where a lot of information is coming to the table because they haven't met criteria yet and they want to get better at it. They're still finalizing that. So as far as, yeah, I'm busy when we need to go to meetings, and I'm in a meeting. I go next month. So yeah.
I mean,
And
they're
for me, I
coming to
travel.
okay. They're coming to the end of their mandate, and 3 years seem like a long time, but it's really not. And so I,
There is
sus-
updates. There's lots
yeah,
of updates.
yeah.
Yeah, that I see that everyone gets. You just have to either go online or listen to the releases that come out
Hmm.
from the chair.
I
Yeah.
Well,
suspect as they get closer to the end, and Paul, what do you? I'll be interested to see what you think of this. I suspect they're going to have all kinds of like updates that sound like it's almost there, just as it's getting to the end, so that they can have something, I guess, encouraging or whatever to say.
well, speaking of updates, um, earlier on in the show, Tam, we talked about how the RCMP the government delayed things in Vancouver over the YVR case. This is a very similar approach, but the newest update we're going to have, and hold on, I need your short response to this. Lisa Banfield is going to be publishing a book in January. Are you expecting any revelations out of this?
No, because I don't put any weight into her words. So for me, it's she can tell a story and she tells great stories, but that's it. And this goes back to, and I can speak about because I have had experience. So the Femicide Committee protecting Emily during the first few years of their death. Femicide wanted to use her name and publish it and her picture with them, and my family was on top of it saying absolutely not. Same with the fact of even with the gender-based information that is we were dealing with and trying to get better with is my family wasn't killed because of their gender. And I know that. So to be tied to those things is very frustrating because that is so far from the truth. I know it's because, okay, maybe here's a fifth thing that I would say that needs to be recommended for police and for us to find a policy for is within the very first week of their deaths. My son was there a year ago before their death, so he was in Portapique. He stayed at Jolene and Aaron's place. And when they died, he was kind of went off the deep end a bit because he said that Aaron told him that he went to the police and asked about, hey, this guy Wortman has a police look-alike vehicle. Now, of course, they have no record of that conversation. So the question I have is, what is the due diligence of the police to keep record of information or information of concerns just in case it comes up at a later date? Do we need even, and I know the police have a lot on their plate and, trying to record that is tough. Do we need just an online forum that people can submit stuff to? I don't know. We're in a new century, new information, very complex society. We need to look at better ways of doing things. And if someone could submit something, then there's always record of it. So I don't know. That would be my 2 cents on getting better.
I like that idea, Tammy, because then it's other than people tell an officer something and they assume, okay, now the police know. No, they don't. The
No.
officer knows, and if the officer wrote it down, then it might make it into a file. And if the officer types that note into the computer, then the police know. But there are multiple steps. Whereas if somebody just submitted that to a form like you're talking about, then there it is. It's there.
But then
Right.
I would say you're just making my case that Wortman was an agent of the RCMP, and the reason nothing got done was because it was all part of something else.
Yeah.
And there are files somewhere, Tammy. We just didn't get them. We just talked about that in the previous case before you came on. The files
Mhm.
were just hidden and or erased.
Was
Last
that from
question.
Dave Moore? Dave Moore, that one last week?
No, just the earlier part of
Oh,
this show.
But
yeah.
that too.
Oh, Dave Moore as well. And we could go
Yeah.
on. Swiss Air. We could
Yeah.
go on. The last thing I wanted to tell you about, I haven't even talked to Adam about this. I understand that Stephen Marr, the former reporter for Everywhere, Maclean's, National Post, writes the Globe Mail, is now scouting around about proposing doing a podcast, a six-part podcast that will be broadcast on the CBC and contacting family and friends of people in uh, involving Portapique. I find it amazing because one of the things that Marr has said from the beginning is that his belief was that the police were overwhelmed, he told someone, and he supports the police, and that Lisa Banfield, Wortman's girlfriend, Kamala wife, was a victim, and he's not going to challenge that. How do you think this podcast is going to go?
Well, I can say all of the families are aligned and we don't believe a word of her story that we can't put evidence to. Like, once again, we need the details of the case and evidence. And as much as I used to work with family violence victims, and you know what? I've worked closely with people who've been in horrific situations because I was in community social work. But without any evidence, and you know what, you were with someone for 20 some odd years, and I can know it take a long time to ask for someone to leave, but there's no record. We don't know of any record of any incidences. You know what I mean? Like, it's very tough to believe somebody without information and without collaborating evidence, like her extenuous story, running into the woods. And like, I just don't want to get into that details because my heart rate does elevate, and as most of the victims' family members do. So she can do what she wants, I guess, but it's just a story. It's just another narrative in the narratives that in the stories that we have. And I will say also, when you talked about um, competing narratives, you mentioned something about that, is that's also been a tough thing from a family member's point of view. Is I have all of these family members, my mom, my dad, my sister, we've got other people in the family, and that is another thing with not having information. The competing narratives and each of our own opinions have often torn us apart, because I believe one thing, but my sister believes another. My mom believes another. Now none of us know what to believe because it's just a whole big mess of stuff. But um, the competing narratives became an issue and a challenge in our own family situation,
But
for
this was
sure.
trauma informed. So you're not supposed to be traumatized. They were taking care of you, remember?
No, the trauma was not for us, in my opinion.
No.
Yeah, everything imposed more trauma on the family members. This
But
was trauma informed for who is the question mark.
yeah, it's a really good point, Tammy. And I mean, we could, I guess, hard to imagine in some ways how difficult this has been for you. I mean, we've of course seen your reaction. That last point you made about different narratives and tearing families apart, I don't think
Mm-hmm.
people would maybe appreciate that aspect of things, but that I could definitely see that happening too with
It
large
happens.
families.
One person believes the police, the other one doesn't. That's a competing narrative,
Yeah, and
and there was so much of that.
well, uh, Tammy, I know
Mm.
the listeners, the viewers are going to really appreciate hearing from you. And as difficult as it is to talk about these things, I think from your perspective, you know, from being on the committee, but also just following this closely as you obviously have for the last 5.5 years, I think is a really valuable perspective. And I want to
Mhm.
thank you for having the courage really to come out and talk about this at length. I'm sure that's not easy.
I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
No, not a problem. Thank you so much for helping me voice some of these things. And, if we're not asking the questions, we're not getting better in society. And that's the biggest thing is we have to have the tough conversations to get into a better space. And I appreciate all the work that you guys put into this. So thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Tammy, and all the best to you and your family.
Yes, thank you. Um,
So, all that was something else. So difficult for her, but she's obviously put a lot of thought into things too.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked her on and off for over the last 5 years, but the NDAs, everyone had an NDA, and we couldn't do a documentary because none of the families would talk because they
No.
all have NDAs signed with their lawyers, with the police, with the commission.
Talked about this at different times, during the commission hearings, but it seemed like many times that we were watching something, but the families were the real show was going on in the lawsuit. And everything, like from the family's perspective, everything was, all right, are we getting something here that we can use in the lawsuit? And from the RCMP's perspective, is everything that is happening here in the commission hearings, what they really cared about was how it might affect the lawsuit. And anyway, that's interesting to hear. Those NDAs were a big problem.
Yeah, well, it kept the lid on the real story. I mean, it prevented people from talking. It made the public forget. We had a guest at our studio this week from Nova Scotia, who had never heard of the massacres.
Oh,
What, 22 people were killed? They saw my book, 22 murders. Is that 22 different murders? No, no, it's all one event. Two events, actually.
yeah, yeah,
Like that's how effective it was. The strategy was at keeping people uninterested in what was going on and unaware of what happened.
yeah. That was definitely part of the strategy. So, all right, well, we'll leave it there then for tonight, Paul. We went a little over the hour. We've been doing that a few times, but I think with the conversation going on
Yeah.
with Tammy, we
Yeah.
certainly didn't want to cut that off. I think that was important to continue on. So, but yeah, anything you're looking forward to th the week ahead? Of
Well, I'm still doing, I don't know if you can read this, but
course, I can read it.
either
Yeah.
a printout of a document. This goes back to the Cabot Links thing in Mabu.
Yes, yes.
I'm again looking at this. The Premier Tim Houston canceled this takeover of the West Mabu Beach, but looking at the document for September 19th, 2025, from Karen Gatien from the Executive Deputy Minister, Department of Natural Resources, to Ben Cowan Dewar, confidential request where Dewar says, where she writes, first of all, thank you for your patience. I'm following up. We've received approval from government to begin confidential negotiations. This is supposed to come from cabinet, not from a deputy minister. Like this tells you there was something untoward going on in my mind. And I think Houston saying, well, this project wasn't right for Nova Scotia at this time. No, I think he got caught and he was in a bad situation.
Well, if you're digging into him, Paul, then he is in a bad situation.
Well,
So
with your help, thank you,
that's
sir.
that's how that goes. So all right, well, we'll keep an eye out for that, and I'm sure there'll be lots more to discuss next week as well. And yeah, so we'll leave it there for tonight. And so thank you everybody that joined us. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See ya. Thank you.